Call the meeting to order, the Finance Committee for Tuesday, July 13, 2021. New business, discuss the accounts payable check register for May 16, 2021 to June 15, 2021 in the amount of $15,086,017.85. Mr. Snellbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The check register is really just for information purposes only. No actions needed. If there are any questions, I'd entertain them now.
Mr.
I did see
Kohler?
the price of the repair for Hammond. Was that in line with what the insurance was paying?
The insurance is paid. The total cost of the largest vendor was about $330,000. There was some other smaller fees. The insurance paid $200,000. They're still contemplating the balance. We're expecting to get a check on that this week.
The holdup is
The deductible, I don't know. That's what we're waiting on the insurance company. All but $10,000, that's our deductible, and that should be reimbursed by the insurance company.
All right, we're going to back up and get Miss Cindy to do roll call.
Is a microphone?
Yeah, my microphone's. You want to do a roll call?
Mr. Westmoreland?
Present.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Dominguez?
Present.
Ms. Abrams?
Here.
All right, moving on to subsection B, consider approval of the 2020-2021 revised operating budgets. Mr. Snodgrass.
Y'all should have copies of the revised budgets at y'all's desk. Great. This revised budget is current year 2021. It includes changes in our special revenue funds, our capital project funds, and our debt service funds. And I'll go over those and give y'all a brief explanation. Under the special revenue funds, we have an increase in our property tax revenue for our Hammond alternative program of about $60,357. Our Hammond magnet program revenue of about $264,045. We have a decrease of $1.3 million in our federal ESSER 1 revenue that is not spent in the 2021 school year, but will carry over to the 21-22 school year. The following items were not in the original budget because they weren't known at the time when we developed it. The ESSER 1 incentive money, $583,199. The ESSER 2, $38,751. The Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund 1 of $1,683,669, of which that money is used for student devices, Verizon, and our MiFis for the upcoming school year. The Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund 2 of $54,559, which is for our ACT vouchers. K-2 literary pilot of $350,000, which would support instructional coaching for our CIR and UIR schools. Special education high-cost services of $76,654. Also a change is items in which we spent less than originally anticipated. Our special ed IDEA, $149,281. Our Title I, $641,582, and our Title II, $140,101, and real-time access, $83,000. We have an increase in our vocational education Carl Perkins grant of $37,690, and a reduction in our Walmart Cham Cooper property agreement from $158,840 to $139,011, and this is based on the new agreement by the parish. We have a reduction in our child nutrition program special revenue fund due to a reduction in the number of meals served. The revenues went down $2.3 million. Expenditures went down $3 million, so we actually had a net increase of about $650,000 in our child nutrition fund. We had an increase in our educational facilities improvement district expenditures related to the April 24th election, which wasn't known when we originally prepared our budget, about $114,000. We have capital project fund changes where we increased the parish-wide capital project fund of $3.8 million, which is due to the increase in our sales tax revenue. We have an increase or created a budget amounts for all Phase 1 projects to include the bond proceeds, cost of issuance, transfers to individual Phase 1 projects based on estimates, payments through June 30th of 2021. And then in our debt service fund, we created a debt service fund for all Phase 1 sales tax bonds, including the 2021 expected transactions for accrued interest on bonds sold, sales tax collected for monthly seeking fund deposits. So those are all the changes that are presented to y'all tonight. Are there any questions? I would entertain them now.
Question.
Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Schnauberger, no, I was trying to listen and then I was flipping through at the same time.
Yes, I went fast. I apologize.
Well, and normally, at least I thought, normally like the stuff you were reading off, you
We'd
would
have a summary page on it, yes.
do we don't have that in here?
We don't have that in here.
No?
No, sir. I'm looking at my accounting department.
Oh, okay.
I summarized the changes. I can put my notes into y'all, give it to y'all before the board meeting, before y'all ratify these changes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Before we do a final vote. But can we talk about the CARES Act funds and can you point me to where, I know you mentioned that we had gotten some of that and it was in the revenue portion of this budget, but then are we also, with the adoption of this revised budget, are we also approving certain expenditures of those funds as well?
We are on some of those expenditures, yes.
Do you know
Yes.
where we can look at those in
If you
here?
turn to page 23, you'll see the CARES Act 005. And you can see that we actually lowered the CARES Act money on that from the original budget to the revised budget. And then if you look at page 26 and 27, you will see the ESSER incentive fund that I've talked about, where we increased that one $583,000. You'll see the ESSER 2 on page 27, where you see a $38,000 on that increase. And then on page, let's see, with it. On page 30, you'll see the governor's emergency education relief fund. And you can see 1.6 million there. And then on page 31, you'll see the governor's emergency education relief fund 2 of the 54,000 I talked about.
Okay. And all of those, so let's see, the one that on 23 was that very first stimulus package, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that was all the computers and all of that stuff, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this, the approval of this would ratify all of those expenditures?
On that one, actually, y'all approved that one.
Okay.
When we did our revised budget back in April. It is not a change being proposed today. On page 25, you'll see,
Was a change of less,
on
right?
page 26, actually, y'all approved the reduction in April on that one.
Already did that.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
On page 26, you'll see the ESSER 1 incentive is the first one y'all would be approving tonight that has not been approved.
So that's an all-new approval.
Correct.
And those expenditures, it says M&S Tech, M&S and telephone. What is,
Well, it,
what is that? What did we do with those?
I'll have to defer to Ms. Kay and see if she knows. I'll have to get back with you on that, Mr. Duncan. I'm
Well, what does
sorry.
M&S generally stand for?
Materials and supplies.
Okay, materials and supplies.
Normally it would be for like Chromebooks, so software, online, training.
Okay.
I know the Governor Emergency Fund 1, we're using the majority of that for Chromebooks in the Verizon and the MiFi's.
And that's the ones that you talked about on
That's the 1.6 million you'll find on page.
30 and 30, what 30?
That's correct.
So that was another Chrome Chromebooks purchase, and then what about indirect costs? Do we know that yet?
That indirect cost is going to the general fund, and we're transferring the majority of that to our capital project funds for future capital project work.
Okay. Were there any, on your list, were there any other federal fund revenues that were new since the last revised budget?
No, I listed the new ones with you. There was a K-2 literary pilot of $350,000. We're using that to have instructional coaches at our CIR and UIR schools. And then we have the special ed high-cost services, about $76,000 for that.
That was in addition, or?
That's in addition.
Okay.
Actually, it may be a new grant, Mr. Duncan,
Okay.
on that.
And was that the reason that, you had said that our special revenue expenditure, our special education revenues, the IDEA was down? What, was that just kind of a shuffling?
I think we just didn't spend what was originally allotted, and I'm not sure why the expenditures were less, but we lowered it to revenue to accommodate the expenditures for the year.
Okay. All right, I may have some other questions after I get to see all your notes, but,
Yes, sir.
but maybe you and I can just talk about that. But I think that's it. Thanks.
I think we'd like to have a motion to approve in a second.
I make a motion to accept the recommended changes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we can have further discussion now. Anybody has anything? If not, we'll call for a vote.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Moving to subsection C, consider approval of the elimination forgiveness of the remaining balance of Kentwood High Magnet School's 2014 band uniform loan and 2015 baseball loan in the amount of $18,481.11. Mr. Schneiderbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kentwood High has two outstanding loans. One was for band uniforms that the board approved back in 2014. The original loan amount was $27,650. The outstanding balance is $10,981.11. The school has reimbursed the central office more than 60% of the loan. The second loan is a loan to start a baseball program. The original loan was $15,000, was for equipment and uniforms and such to get the baseball going. The school has paid 50% of the loan back. The outstanding portion is $7,500. The total of the two loans is $18,481.11. The school administration has not asked for this. The district administration is asking the board to consider waiving this loan. Last year when COVID hit, schools were shut down at the end of last school year. We deferred the loan payments on these two loans. In this current year, with the reduction in enrollment, the lesser activities, the schools haven't, we think the schools having struggling to generate the revenue to pay the loan back. We're asking the board to consider waiving this loan and forgive the remaining balances on these two loans.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Duncan,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Abrams. Discussion?
I know we're going to move down to D in just a minute. Mr. Glenn brought this up a while ago. Are there any other schools that have outstanding loans like this besides Laranja and Kentwood? Are there
No.
any junior high schools that might have loans like this?
No, ma'am.
This is
These are
it.
the only schools that have outstanding loans with the central office.
Mr. Toller?
Yeah, I support, I'm not on this committee, so I'll get my chance at the committee meeting. I support under the circumstances, I understand, especially the band, they make a lot of their income marching in parades, and they lost that with Mardi Gras. But I do want to clarify one thing. In the email that we got earlier, comparing that to a scoreboard, I don't necessarily agree with. And the reason is simple. Scoreboard, 1981 at Sumner, was bought by the school system and put there by the school system. It lasted almost 40 years. We replaced it. The school raised almost half the funds through advertising, but that is a fixed item asset that is mounted at the school. I don't think it's a comparison to use that as an example to say why we should do this. This can stand on its own, but not use it as an excuse to. A school board, in my opinion, a scoreboard is a fixed asset that belongs to the school. It's not a program, it's not band uniform, it's not baseball bats or sporting athletic equipment. It is a piece of our property that we own as a school system. So, but I do support, under the circumstances with COVID, helping a school where I know the parents are struggling on that. But just, it's going to open a door for years to come from Ponchatoula, Laranja, and Hammond, everybody else to say, we need uniforms. We need equipment.
There are some unusual circumstances the last 2 school years.
Correct.
Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, and this is something I think every time an issue like this comes up, I think we end up kind of saying the same thing, which is we justify this particular expenditure, then we talk about, well, you know, we really ought to come up with some sort of criteria on how we will consider these in the future, and then we don't actually come up with them, and then we end up back in the same place. You know, and it's kind of the same song, different verse, but you know, we really do, I think, need to make a commitment to figuring out how we want to handle this down the road, because you know, right now it's easy to approve this because we have the money. In previous years, when there's been similar situations, we've had to tell people no because we didn't have the money. You know, I can think specifically of an incident a few years ago at Greenville Park when they were trying to rebuild their football program after it had gotten disbanded, and we were trying to put it all back together, and we were trying to scrape dollars together to get it done. The money wasn't there that particular year to help them, and you know, so we just kind of mostly scrapped through it. But we really do need to come up with some sort of way that we're going to deal with these types of things in the future, whether it's setting in our budget how much we want to spend on these things each year, figuring out how we want to allocate it, and then saying that's it, or whether it's about, you know, what's the criteria for forgiving loans. You know, there needs to be a lot better guidance that we stick to in the future when it comes to these types of expenditures. But yeah, I mean, this one isn't, I guess, one we need to support.
Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Rose?
Well, I spoke with Ms. Stilley and Mr. Schnatterbach today extensively about this because I do know this past year was a hard year, but we did have some schools that really stepped up to the plate and did a lot of fundraisers, and the community supported them and to meet their needs. They worked hard. So it was you were capable of doing that. It's just some people have a little bit more initiative to get out and do those things. And Ponchatoula's always, you know, risen to the challenge, and so is Hammond. You know, the community just supports them, but you got people out there that do it. So, I mean, I never did agree that we should have to purchase, the students should have to purchase their own items to play baseball or their own items to play whatever the sport is. The school system should support those things. But once we start this, we need to have a protocol set up because this is breaking all protocols. This will be the first change of all protocols that we've always established. So if we're going to forgive because of this, then we need to set some guidelines. Same thing with Mr. Duncan and I talked today about, last year we talked about purchasing the band equipment, the instruments.
Correct.
And then we have instruments that are maybe in a storage that no one's using, that needs to be itemized and used at another school because they belong to us. And they can be used somewhere. So the same thing with this. If we set this protocol, or we change this protocol, we're setting a new protocol. So that's my only, you know, because I never really agreed that we ever had to pay for this kind of stuff anyway. The kids should never have to pay for that stuff. We should be able to provide that stuff. But once we start it, we need to be able to fund it.
Anybody else? Okay, call for a vote.
Online voting is open. Online voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Section D, consider approval of the elimination forgiveness of the remaining balance on Laranja High School's activity school bus loan in the amount of $5,000. Mr. Snodgrass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This loan was made 2 years ago. The original purchase price of the bus was $10,000. The school paid half. They borrowed $5,000 from the central office. None of the loan has been paid back because we deferred last year due to COVID. This year, again, for the same reason as with Kentwood, with the opportunities to utilize the bus and generate revenue was not available. Laranja, if you go back in 2002, 2003, and 2004, we bought new school buses. The first two we bought were in Kentwood and Sumner. The next two we bought were at Ponchatoula High and Hammond High. And then the next two we bought were Independence and Amite. Laranja was the only school that did not get a new school bus in the early 2000s. Then we came in 2004, 5. We had some rough times under Jendal. We weren't able to buy a bus for Laranja High. So, Laranja needed another activity bus. They had a bus driver who was retiring. They were able to purchase their bus for $10,000. They came up with half the money. The administration is, and again, the principal has not asked for this request, but the administration is asking the board to consider waiving the balance on this loan.
Do I hear a motion?
I make the motion.
Motion by Ms. Robin,
Second.
second by Mr. Duncan. Discussion? Mr. Bush?
I'm like Mr. Toller, I'm not on this committee, Mr. Stonerbach, but, and when we do our plan that we follow, why do we have to loan any school any money anyway?
We should have bought it to start with.
You know, I mean, why, why don't we just buy it? I mean, it's a bus.
Yes.
You know, they were, I mean, I don't understand this loaning this money. Do we charge them interest?
We do charge them
You're
interest.
kidding me.
The same rate that we generate from the general fund.
Oh, wow. I don't know, that's just a thought.
So who's actually is borrowing this money? Is it the school or is it a booster club?
It's the school. It was approved by the previous superintendent to loan the money, and the school principal administrator approved the loan.
So our students have to get back and forth from events, and we made them borrow money from us to buy a school bus
But we didn't,
and charge
Ms. Abrams,
interest.
we didn't make them borrow the money. They wanted to buy the school bus, did not have enough funds, and came asking to borrow the funds.
But if they wouldn't have, would they have had a bus to get where they needed to go?
They would have been able to use their school-owned buses or their contract driver buses and compensate the contract driver
And they
or
would
the
have,
school transportation department for the use of the bus.
right, and they would have paid the contract driver. So in this situation, they were saving money by getting their own bus.
But
So,
at the
I mean,
same time, Mr. Toller, one of the challenges is that some of the activities are run at the same time kids are being transported home. So by
Right.
having an activity bus available, like a baseball game, which is played before, many of the playing fields don't have lights, so they play early and they leave at the same time that kids are being transported home and buses aren't available. So the activity buses are needed for some of these trips.
But to back up and explain, I think what Mr. Bush is asking is, the way this stuff happened back in more difficult financial times is this, simplifying it a little bit, but help me, Mr. Schnotterbach, is the school would send in an expenditure request. The central office / board would say, hey, we don't have the money to do that, we can't do it. And then they would say, well, what if we agreed to pay the money back? And they came up with this way to basically get something that we couldn't afford at the time, but with an understanding that the school would help raise the funds to pay for it. And so this was we did this a lot for a while. The issue, though, was that then we started forgiving the loans for various reasons, and we never really came up with a criteria on how we were going to consider whether to forgive or not. And there were all kinds of things that we considered in the past. Some of it was, well, the booster club helped raise X percentage of the money, we ought to forgive the rest of it. And we would say, yeah, okay. And then, it's been all kinds of things. They really had a hard time. They borrowed the money and then the program didn't work out. It went away, but the money's still owed. There was a number of those, but that's.
I just think my point was, if you had the money to loan it to them, we didn't go borrow it and loan it to them, did we?
No,
Why
we did
couldn't
not-
we just buy the
no,
bus
sir, we
and
didn't
start
borrow
with
the
that?
money.
That's the only thing, that's my question. Why would we just buy it I mean, we had the money anyway, so it wasn't like we didn't have it to make them pay it back.
Well, the
I'm not
present
saying we
board
want to do
won't
away
make
with it either. I don't know. I'm just asking a question.
Sound like the present board would just buy it anyway, so call for a vote.
Or say something.
Hold on, Ms.
Well,
Rose.
I know, we provided so many activity buses. Well, like at Punch Hill High, there's, at that time, 1,800 kids. So there is a way to get another bus, and I know Mr. Strickland, I have to give him kudos. He worked his finances over there great. And he had a plan, and he purchased his own extra activity bus because they needed another bus. They did it because of his thinking, because if you're gonna take a kid, a group on a track event or a basketball event, they have to pay somebody. So they would pay and use the school's buses, and then that money would be in turn used to buy a bus. So it was a way to generate money, but not cost money. I think that would be a great idea if all of us did that. If we're paying a contract driver to drive the field trip, they get $15 an hour, minimum 2 hours. They could take that money and use it, their coaches or their CDL people could drive the buses.
The real cost on that is the use of the bus, where we're paying $1.40 or $1.50 or $1.60 a mile, depending on the fuel price. And that's where Mr. Strickland was able to utilize his activity buses to get the mileage paid back to him, so he can then accumulate money, if he maintained the bus in good condition, to accumulate money to buy a new replacement bus when that bus got to be too old.
So it's a way to do it. Maybe we need to look into that
But
in the future.
in all fairness, if you're utilizing a bus on a daily basis, you can accumulate that revenue faster than a school such
small
as,
school, yeah.
that may be using it once a week. So
Correct.
keep that in mind. There's
Yeah,
a difference.
Yeah. But there again, I'm just saying, they bought their own bus.
Yeah.
They bought their bus. They didn't, the system didn't buy that extra bus.
Call for a vote.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Last section, E, consider approval of the proposed 21-22 travel reimbursement rate schedule. Mr. Snoddelbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we're proposing changes to the travel reimbursement rate to mirror the state rate. By policy, we should follow the state-approved rates, and these are the new state-approved rates for the 21-22 school year.
Hear a motion to adopt?
Make a motion.
I'll make a, she made, I'll
Motion by Ms.
second.
Abrams, second by Ms. Rose. Any discussion? Call for a vote.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, nothing else to be brought before the Finance Committee?
Just some information, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The timeline for our 21-22 operating budget is next Tuesday, July 20th. I would like to have a Finance Committee meeting, if y'all would approve, to obtain approval to advertise the 21-22 budget, which is required by law, and to go to the board at the same night to only approve advertising. The budget would be then available for public inspection on starting July 21st. On August 17th, we will have a public hearing, and then the board would consider adoption of the 21-22 budget on August 17th. And somewhere between the 21st of July and the end of July, I would meet with each individual board member, answer any questions or concerns they have about the 21-22 operating budgets.
So, is it going to come through finance for
It will come to finance to advertise, and then we would come back to finance at the first meeting in August, get y'all to approve it, and then it would come, I left that off, I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan.
Okay.
And then it would come to the public hearing on the 17th, and then the full board on the 17th.
Okay, so we would have a finance committee meeting to review the budget and have a
Correct, the
budget.
first meeting in August.
Okay,
So you need one for the 20th, you saying?
We'd like a special meeting on the 20th just to obtain permission to advertise.
Sure.
Not to approve, but just to
That'll
advertise.
be before our regular board meeting.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Is
We
it
can do that.
possible to make a motion to, a unanimous motion to add that one thing to the agenda today?
Ms. Kay, can we do that today?
To give permission to advertise?
Can we do it before the board meeting? We could do it right before the board meeting at 5:50 or 6 o'clock, if that's okay? So
Yeah.
you don't have to meet earlier?
I'm just saying if that's all you're going to do, why would we have to have a meeting
Well, we
just to?
haven't developed it.
Oh,
So,
I got you.
We're still finalizing some of the documents, and we have to review it with Ms. Stilley.
Yeah, just maybe do it for 5:45. Just notice it for 5:45.
If y'all are okay with that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I saw we have two of our esteemed parish council members here. I just wanted to thank them for being here and welcome them, our parish.
Carlos not even paying attention to us.
With that, with that being,
Esteemed.
Oh, I say esteemed, that confused y'all. But they gave,
A lot of things, but not that.
but seeing them, I had an idea about you said we don't currently have any other loans out to schools or anything like that. We could steal a page out of their book and do a moratorium on any future loans to the school until we have a committee established to set up our policies and procedures.
Well, you can make that
That
motion.
sounds like a motion, Mr. Duncan.
Sounds like a
Not
motion.
on the agenda.
And before we do that, can y'all go over that solar panel thing y'all talked about the other night? I want to hear more about that.
with our councilman being here, can we move, well, we're going to adjourn this meeting.